needing urgency or interest to activate. Your brain is looking for a spike in dopamine to kind of kickstart it. Raise your hand if you were that starting the term paper the night before person. My hand is raised every single time. They were like, yeah, this is not a term paper. You can wait until the last minute to start. And I was like, yeah, watch me. However, as an adult, we cannot continue to do that. That needing urgency, that waiting until the last minute to get yourself to do things. On a physical level, it increases your blood pressure. It increases cortisol levels. There's like nothing good, physically speaking, that comes from that. Hey, I am Jorie Houlihan, your guide for the dopamine deprived, and this is ADHD and the podcast for women who were diagnosed late and are ready to stop blaming themselves and start figuring out how their brains work. Today, we are talking about the science behind ADHD, specifically the role of dopamine and norepinephrine, and why this isn't about effort, motivation, or quote unquote, not caring enough. It is about brain chemistry. And once you better understand how this works, a lot of things start to make way more sense. So let's start with the obvious fact that is very often forgotten. ADHD is not a character flaw. Seriously, it's not a character flaw. It's not laziness. It's not entitlement. It's not stupidity. And it's not trying hard enough. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is, by all accounts, one of the most terribly misnamed conditions on the planet. It trivializes what ADHD really is. We don't actually have a deficit of attention. Our brains actually want to pay attention to everything. We just can't always regulate where that attention goes. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. It is a neurobiological condition, which just simply means that your brain developed differently, and that difference impacts how you regulate attention, motivations, emotions, time, memory, and decision making. Is that all? Anyway, at the center of all of that is two neurotransmitters known as dopamine and norepinephrine. So let's take a look at those, shall we? All right. What are they? What are these? So these are neurotransmitters. And neurotransmitters are chemical messengers of the brain. They send signals telling the brain what to do, etc. Dopamine is the feel-good neurotransmitter. It is what gets you to do the thing. And it also is what gives us a sense of accomplishment afterwards. It's the brain's motivation signal, if you will. It helps with task initiation, task follow-through, two things that we struggle with. So when dopamine levels are balanced, your brain knows what's important, how to prioritize, and when to take action. And fun fact, it also helps to regulate movements such as balance and handwriting. Bet you didn't know that. Oh, and also, another fun fact, neurotypicals get a hit of dopamine just thinking about completing a task. I am so happy for them. Anyway, dopamine is then converted into norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline. That fires the frontal lobe. Norepinephrine helps with alertness, focus, and attention shifting. It's the brain's "you should be paying attention to this now" signal. I couldn't make it any shorter, sorry. Too little norepinephrine and you are easily distracted, you have brain fog, it's hard to sustain attention. You have too much and you can become jittery, anxious, and overwhelmed. Now, why is this important in the grand scheme of ADHD? The frontal lobe works as a filter. We are inundated with information all day long, most of which we don't need to know on a conscious level. And a properly working frontal lobe takes that 99% and throws it somewhere in your subconscious so that just the really important things get through. And then the rest of the brain says, oh, that got through. It must be important. We need to pay attention to it. So what then is happening in the ADHD brain when it comes to these two neurotransmitters? When it comes to dopamine, sometimes our body just doesn't produce enough. Sometimes we have too many receptors in an area of the brain, so it ends up sucking the dopamine in too quickly. It's called the uptake. It sucks it in too quickly before it has a chance to really mature for the next leg of its journey. And the studies have also shown that sometimes the dopamine can't find the receptors because That's pretty ADHD if you ask me. Even our dopamine's getting distracted. We have lower and less consistent levels of both dopamine and, as a result, norepinephrine in key parts of the brain, especially in the prefrontal cortex. That is the area of the brain that is largely responsible for executive functioning. That's the part of your brain that helps with planning, organizing, prioritizing, managing time, making decisions, regulating your emotions. Again, is that all? So let's first talk about the frontal lobe in terms of being a filter. So before I told you that it works to filter out the majority of that information, but if the dopamine didn't have a chance to mature, if we didn't have enough, obviously that frontal lobe isn't going to fire as well, correct? As a result, way more information is going to get through that filter. Unfortunately, the rest of the brain is still saying, oh, that got through. It must be important. We need to pay attention to it. So this is in part one of the reasons we are so easily distracted, because we have all this data coming through and our brain is trying to pay attention to all of it. Let me give you a practical demonstration of how that could show up, especially when I was in high school. I don't know if I just didn't notice it before then or what, but anyway, in high school, anytime I had to take a test, especially if it was a test I was nervous about, my brain could not filter out the ticking of the clock. I mean, it was like, how does no one else hear this? But it was really distracting to me. And I would even try to move across the class, hoping it would help me not hear it as easily. But my brain really struggled to tune that out. Do you think that impacted how well I tested? You betcha it did. And I spent most of my life just thinking I was stupid. I was the only one of my friends not in the National Honor Society, which didn't help anything, but I digress. Turns out I'm not stupid. My brain just couldn't filter out that information, which of course impacted how well I tested. So that's one of the things that can happen. So think of that filter as, when it's working properly, it's like an Oprah level executive assistant, right? Like nobody sees Oprah unless they're important. Our brains are more like, okay, I'm definitely dating myself when I say this. If you've ever watched the Carol Burnett show, which by the way, if you haven't, you should, because it's hilarious. But anyway, she has a character called Mrs. Wiggins, and she is the secretary to Mr. Tudball, and she is the world's worst secretary. She's always painting her nails and chomping her gum and walks really slow. Everybody and their mother could get in to see Mr. Tudball because she couldn't do anything to stop them. That's our executive assistant, if we even have one. So just so you can kind of have a visual on how that one works. All right, so how can these lower levels show up in other ways? Obviously, struggling with task initiation. The low dopamine means that we don't have the motivation signal to get started. Trouble staying focused because the low levels of norepinephrine can't help you filter out the distractions. Inconsistent follow through because the dopamine runs out. Needing urgency or interest to activate. Your brain is looking for a spike in dopamine to kind of kickstart it. Raise your hand if you were that starting the term paper the night before person. My hand is raised every single time. They were like, yeah, this is not a term paper. You can wait until the last minute to start. And I was like, yeah, watch me. And it didn't help that I always did pretty well on them because it didn't motivate me to not do that again. However, as an adult, we cannot continue to do that. That needing urgency, that waiting until the last minute to get yourself to do things, because on a physical level, it increases your blood pressure. It increases cortisol levels. There's like nothing good, physically speaking, that comes from that. Learning how to not do that, though, it's tough. I'm not going to lie. I still struggle with it sometimes, but I also have seen the benefit of starting things earlier. So I'm getting a little more motivated to do that. We will get into all of this in more depth in future episodes. However, that is one of the areas where it will show up. And also emotionally overreacting to things. Your executive control is impacted when dopamine is low and the brain is overstimulated. So we will sometimes overreact to a small thing, right? On the flip side, and this is where we are very often walking contradictions. At the same time, in emergencies, our emotional capabilities are like, okay, I'm handling this, you're handling that, you're doing this, we've got this, and you just handle it. And that is in part because Emergencies kick in adrenaline. Adrenaline's like a shot of Adderall, and that is what gets your brain to go, okay, everything becomes crystal clear in what needs to get done. So it's interesting, is it not? I think it is. Okay, so it is not that you are lazy. You are just underpowered in your brain. You don't have the brain fuel that you need when it comes to the neurotransmitters. So I want you to hear this loud and clear. If your brain doesn't naturally release dopamine in response to boring, repetitive, or low interest tasks, of course it's hard to get started doing them. For people saying, but I don't always have interest in things and I can do it, you are starting at a higher dopamine baseline than we are. That makes a huge difference. This is why advice like, just do it, just focus, just try harder, or just make a list and stick with it. You're assuming that I remember where my list is. First of all, it can be so frustrating. So stop telling people that if you're the person telling people that. It is not that we don't know what to do. It is about how your brain activates. If you don't have those chemical messengers there to send the signals, how are you going to start? It's much more difficult. What can we do to help with this besides medication? While medication can absolutely help in increasing dopamine and norepinephrine levels, and for many people, including me, can be a huge help. It is not the only tool, and it shouldn't be your only tool. Because the truth is pills don't teach skills. Now, for some of us, like me, I needed the pills to learn the skills, but that's another episode. You want to have as many tools in your toolbox as possible. So there are things that you can do to build into your day to help your brain work with the brain chemistry that it's got, not the one you wish you had. All right. So tools that can support dopamine, interest-based activities. There are 4 things that will get us moving. Interest, novelty, challenge, urgency. And I have a 5th one, which is external accountability. Interest-based activation. Choosing tasks that are naturally interesting or tie boring tasks to something you find interesting or that you love to do is going to help you do the thing. For example, let's use laundry. Laundry is my nemesis. I don't know if I've mentioned that before. Laundry is my nemesis. I hate laundry. Anyway, but one of the things that helps me do it is to listen to music that I find motivating and moving, and I can dance to it, whatever, while I'm folding laundry. It just makes it a lot more fun, a lot more interesting, and I'm definitely going to be more inclined to do it because I have tied it to a task or to an activity that I enjoy. Some of you may fold laundry while watching your favorite TV show or listening to a podcast, for example. Another thing is immediate feedback and small rewards. So when you can break tasks down into smaller chunks, every time you complete one of those little chunks, you're giving yourself a little dopamine, right? You're checking off the box. Because think about it. When you do make a to-do list and you do know where it is and think to look at it, a lot of us will go back and add things that weren't on the list originally, but that we did because it gives us dopamine. That's one of the reasons we do that. Let's go back to laundry. Some days when I am so overwhelmed because that mound of laundry that is just taunting me every time I walk by it is just getting bigger, I go, okay, I have to do something. And so what I'll do is I'll say, all right, I'm just going to hang or fold 3 items. I'll just do that to start. And I'll do that. And then I'll go, okay, that wasn't so bad. All right, let me do 3 more. Okay, 3 more. All right, 3 more after that. Next thing you know, it's usually done. What you're looking to do is start the momentum. The momentum is what gives you the motivation. The motivation doesn't come first, usually for us. You also want to give yourself small rewards. People with ADHD don't naturally have a sense of accomplishment because dopamine is what gives us a sense of accomplishment and ours is low. So usually when we complete a task, we feel less accomplished and more just relieved it's over with. That sounds really depressing, doesn't it? Anyway, that is what it is. So we have to kind of train ourselves to celebrate our progress. For example, let's go back to laundry. I do the first 3 things, and then I'm going to be like, I'm doing a little happy dance. I did it. And in the beginning, you might feel kind of stupid, but it gives me another opportunity to just dance and listen to music, which I love to do. It also then encourages me to do 3 more, all right? To fold 3 more things or hang 3 more things, whatever it is. Think about the things that you might find fun to help you celebrate. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It can just be a little happy dance, whatever it is. But it does help. Then body doubling. Body doubling is one of the best things I have ever discovered in terms of getting me to do the thing. It's basically like borrowing somebody else's nervous system. Let's say you call your neighbor and say, you know what, I have this amount of laundry I have to get folded. Can you just come and sit on my couch? They'll come sit on your couch. They do their thing. They'll probably think this is a little weird, but whatever, you don't care. And them being there gets you to do the thing. There is a virtual version of that too. I happen to use one called Focus Mate. I'll put the link in the show notes. And it's the virtual version of this. So you pick a time slot that works for you. They partner you with some other random procrastinator somewhere in the world. You get on your call at the select time. It's like Zoom, but their interface. You tell them what you're working on. They tell you what they're working on, and then you work. There's no chit chat. That is key. No chit chat. And then when it's over, there's a little harp sound. And then you say, yep, I stayed on task. If you did, if not, you tell them that too. They do the same for you. And then you move on. It is so helpful. It's weird, but it's so helpful. It increases your dopamine, and it also gives you that external accountability. Some tools that can help with the norepinephrine. You want external cues, timers, visuals, alarms, routines, things that reduce the cognitive load of remembering. We want to reduce the mental load any time we can. I am all about externalize your thoughts. In this case, it's externalize what you need to remember. If you use timers and alarms in particular, I will say this much. If they're digital on your phone, label them. Because I have had times where I just have alarms and timers going off and I'm like, I don't even remember what these are for. What am I supposed to be doing with this? And then I would get overwhelmed by it. But now I'll be like, hey, get off your butt and get back to work. You know, fun things like that. That's what my labels will say. So you want to make it kind of fun, but those can really help just to take off the cognitive load again, so that you don't have to try and remember everything and keeping it all in your brain. You also want to control the stimulus around you, right? You control your environment. I need to be very clear about that. You control that. You want to reduce your distractions by controlling certain aspects of your environment, such as maybe you wear noise-canceling headphones or earbuds, right? Maybe those loops can help to cut out some of the noise. Having a white noise machine, clearing off your desk. Now, I know we have piles on our desk because there's something in those piles that we need to remember. You just need to get them so they're not in your immediate purview while you're working. Okay, because I keep hitting my microphone, sorry. Because when your desk feels more cleared off, your brain feels more cleared out, and it is much easier to get things done. Okay, so very important. You want to start with alerting tasks, like throw some cold water on your face. Seriously, that'll get you started. Movement helps. Sometimes I will tell people, do a little dance party in your office. Listen to music that you could just listen to all day that gets the dopamine going. That'll then convert to norepinephrine. You want to get the movement. You want to get maybe some bright light, music. All these things can increase your norepinephrine and as a result, help your brain wake up. All right, so when you better understand how your brain works, chemically speaking, right? When you start to understand the science behind all of this, you can stop blaming yourself for the things that have nothing to do with motivation. They have nothing to do with effort, and they have everything to do with biology. Your brain isn't broken. It's just wired differently, and that is okay. You just need to figure out what that looks like for you. You can stop trying to force yourself into the neurotypical expectations. People with ADHD are out-of-the-box thinkers. We are creative problem solvers. We are out-of-the-box thinkers about everything except for executive functions. And then we keep trying to shove ourselves in the neurotypical box. Honey, you are a shiny disco globe. You're not going to fit in that box. So stop trying to do that and start creating strategies that actually support you. If this episode has helped connect a few of the dots for you, would you be so kind as to share it with somebody else who may need to hear it too? And I would also love it if you would follow if you haven't already, and leave a comment if you got something out of today. All right, our next episode, we are going to be talking about time blindness. That is going to be a good one. We don't feel time passing. We don't know how long things take to do. And then we wonder why our schedules are a mess. We're going to learn how to deal with that in the next episode, so you definitely want to be there. So until then, honor your brain chemistry. You're not lazy. Your brain just doesn't have the fuel that it deserves in order to do the things it needs to do. This is ADHD and with Jorie Houlihan, because it's not just focus, it's everything. Stay curious, ladies.